Hey guys, in this video we'll continue with our Cubase 12 tutorial series. We'll cover the basics of the layout and how to navigate through the program and its different views. We'll also talk about some of the basic features that are included with it. Before starting this video, make sure you're familiar with getting Cubase 12 installed and configured by watching part 1 of this series on our channel. For the basic view, Cubase is separated into 4 zones. There is a left, right, and lower zone. The center zone is the project zone where we find our main track and clip listing. This is always visible and cannot be hidden. The other zones are hidden with the left, lower, and right zone buttons in the top right of the main Cubase window. Besides these, we have the window layout settings. This gives us another way to turn on and off zones. It's also used to display the transport bar at the bottom. From this section, I'll also turn on status bar for now, which shows the recording time available based on our drive space and the record format. The default we have it set to is 44.1 kHz and 24-bit. The left zone has the inspector and visibility panels that are selected at the top. The inspector is selected for the active track in the center project zone. It is used to adjust the settings for each of our tracks. If we pull up an audio track, we can see that we get options for mute, solo, record arming, automation, fades, linear time versus musical time, locking, and freezing the track. We can also see here the track input and output. We get additional drop-downs for track versions, chords, equalization, inserts, sends, fader, and additional controls. Some of these features will be looked at in more detail later. The left zone also has the visibility panel at the top. The visibility panel lets us hide or view our tracks on the project zone by clicking on the check mark. At this point, to follow along, make sure you have the bottom zone enabled and select the mix console along the tab selector at the bottom. Going back to the left zone, we can select visibility at the top and zones at the bottom. With visibility set to zones, we can change where the mix console channels are displayed with the left, center, and right buttons beside the track names. I can set stereo in on the left, the audio and instrument tracks in the middle, and the stereo output on the right. Now on the bottom panel, select Editor and change the left panel to Inspector at the top and the Editor at the bottom. This shows us controls for editing timing to warp an audio clip. That covers the left view of the panel for now, and we'll come back to a few of these individually later as we get into some more techniques. Let's go over the right zone. The right zone has 4 tabs at the top, and they are VSTI, Media, CR for Control Room, and Meter. The VSTI tab shows us our VST instruments such as drum and synthesizer plugins used on our project. We can also add instruments from here with the plus button. The up and down arrows allow us to change which instrument is in focus for the function keys on the Midi controller. Each instrument has a power button to turn it on and off, and the E button opens the instrument itself with its own window, and each instrument will have controls to adjust its sound. The next button is to freeze the instrument. If we press the button at the top with the circle and the triangle in it, we can expand the plugins to see more controls such as volume, panning, and mute controls. Moving on to the media panel, we get menus for all our effects, instruments, loops, and samples. Clicking on each of these shows us what we have available, and there's a little arrow at the top left to go back. The last tabs for the right zone are the control room and the output level meter. The lower zone gives us our mix console, editor for audio files, sampler control, chord pads, and MIDI remote. Some of these tools will be looked at in more detail throughout this tutorial series. Let's move on to the top panel. First, let's make sure we display all the tools we need to go through up here. To do that, click the setting gear in the far top right of the screen. Here we click Show All, then unselect Transport, Locators, Locator Range Duration, and Time Displays. All of these will be shown in the bottom screen right now, and otherwise they'll take up too much space. If they aren't shown, go to the Setup Window Layout button directly to the left and select Transport Bar. Also make sure the status line, info line, and overview are shown to follow along. With all the panels displayed, grab any of the ones with the 3 dots next to them and drag them right to expand the view for all the buttons. Starting from the top left, we have the project history buttons, which are undo and redo, working like any other software we use. Next is the Constrain delay compensation, and this is used with MIDI instruments and live audio to prevent latency. Then we have the button to open the media bay with all sorts of sounds from our system. The pool window opens a listing of all the files saved to our project, including the audio files, video files, and unused files in the trash. The Mix Console button opens a mixer view with a separate window. We can view this here or see it in the bottom zone as well. The next button is for the control room. We won't focus on this too much at this point in the tutorial, but it's accessed from this button and the right zone. The last button in this set is the Direct Offline Processing window. This allows us to apply plugins to clips and events as a process instead of an insert, but with the Direct Offline Processing tool, these plugins can be changed after and the editing is non-destructive, so the original audio is kept, meaning we can add, remove, change, and reorder these plugins in the future, with the advantage of it still being applied and using less computer processing. To the right, we have some configuration and visibility controls. These allow us to set up views of our project. So for example, we can create one right now called Bass, hold down Control and select Tracks, then go to the Track Visibility Agents button on the right and press Show Only Selected Tracks. Then update the configuration to save it from the configuration dropdown. If we're working on a set of instruments, then we can use this to group the visibility together and switch back and forth quickly. I'll set another configuration as All Tracks and set the visibility to Show All Tracks, then update the configuration again. Now we can use that dropdown to switch between views. On the right of this panel, we have filter track types, so we can show audio tracks, instrument tracks, MIDI tracks, or effects tracks as a unit. The next panel shows us the state buttons. This is used to deactivate mute, solo, and listen states on all tracks. Then we can choose to activate or deactivate read, write, and read-write automation for all tracks together. After that, we have the automation panel. The first button is to follow events, then the automation mode, and the final button is the more advanced automation panel window button. Using automation in Cubase will require a dedicated video on its own later in this tutorial series. The next button is for auto scroll, and with this enabled, the main project window will move along with the track. It can be set to page view so that the cursor moves along the screen as you play, or to stationary view so the cursor stays in the center and the clips move in the background. The panel that shows 1, 2, 3, 4 here is the markers panel. The settings button to the right opens the markers window. Clicking on one of the markers buttons allows you to jump to a marker in the project, so you can set them to different sections like a verse, chorus, or solo section of the song. If we put the cursor to a time selection of the project, we can open the markers window and click the Add Position Marker button. Then we can add a description to it here by double-clicking and typing in that box. I will call this Start of Song and put it at the 5th measure since we have 4 measures at the start as a buffer and count in. Now pressing the Marker 1 button along the top panel snaps our time to the start of the song. Moving to the right, we have the tool buttons. On the left is the Combine Section tools, which activates the Object Selection and Range Selection tools together. The Object Selection tool selects events and clips. The Range Selection tool selects a time range. Then we have the Draw and Erase tools to create and remove events. The Split tool will cut a clip at that time selection. The Glue tool can combine them back together. The Mute tool is used to mute a clip rather than an entire track. The Zoom tool is used to zoom in, and if you hold Control while clicking it, it will zoom back out. The Comp tool is used to manage multiple takes, which we will look at in our audio recording video. Time Warp can adjust the timing of the project at certain areas. The Line tool is used to create new events. The play tool allows us to preview clips, but this requires a little bit of signal routing as it will go through the control room panel. Last, we have the color tool to change the color of each clip. The drop down to the right selects the color from a color panel. Next, we have the nudge tools. These are used to move around or lengthen a clip from the start or the end. The first drop down lets us control the snapping, and in this case it's set to link to grid, which means it's using the project snapping that we'll cover in a minute. This can be set to a different grid resolution than under the beats and bars, or used with linear time. The beats and bars one snaps to a measure by default, but the note values of the snapping can be changed here as well. The first button nudges the start to the left and lengthens the start of the clip, and the next button nudges the start to the right and shortens the beginning of the clip. The next two buttons move the entire clip left and right. After that, the nudge buttons will shorten or lengthen the end of the clip. The project root key to the right changes the key of the project that we're working in and will help with things like Midi and chords later on. The snap to zero crossing makes it so our edits will lock to a point where the amplitude of the clip is 0. If we cut off a clip where it isn't 0, it can create clicking or popping sounds at the end. The next set of tools are the snapping tools. The left button turns snapping on and off. The drop-down sets what we're snapping to. We can snap to grid lines such as a bar and beat, or we can set it relative so that it snaps by that amount but not necessarily to the bar or beat if the original time was not snapped to it. After that, we can see the quantize tool to adjust timing to make it more on beat. The Q button applies a quantization to our clips. With the middle audio warp button enabled, it will apply time stretches within the audio clip to fix the timing for us. The left button allows us to change the quantization to soft quantize. The right button opens the quantization menu for more options. To the right, we have the audio alignment panel. This sets a reference track and a target track to apply time stretching and movement to the audio to make them line up as best as possible and avoid any slight differences in timing. It's used in cases such as double tracking vocals and guitars to make the timing tighter. Next is the audio performance meter. This shows you your computer's processing power and disk usage so that you don't exceed it. If we are exceeding it, there are ways we can reduce the usage, such as reducing the use of our plugins and bouncing tracks. Last, we have the Midi Remote Mapping Assistant, which is used to program Cubase to use the Midi inputs from our Midi controller to control different functions in the digital audio workstation. That covers the top panel, so let's focus on the bottom panel now. Again, like the top panel, expand out each of the bottom panel components to see everything, that way you can follow along. Click and drag the 3 dots next to each of them. We start with another Constrain Delay Compensation button. Next are the record options. We have punch in out and re-record first. Punch in out makes it so pressing the record button after starting stops the recording. If we press the record button in re-record mode, it will start the recording over. Next are the buttons to start recording at the project cursor position, which is the time that we're at in the project right now, or start recording at the left locator position, which is a set position that we can adjust. The drop-down to the right controls what happens when we record over a clip that's already in the project. Keep History will layer the new clip on top and not delete it. Cycle History and Replace will remove all previous audio recordings and keep the ones from this recording session, even if multiple takes are recorded, and Replace will remove everything and keep only the last take. Similarly, we have controls for recording over Midi. The top part for linear and cycled recording is similar to audio in that it controls what happens to the clips at the end of the recording. With Midi, we can create new parts, merge the Midi data into old parts, or replace the old parts. Second setting is regarding cycle recording for a section, and we can choose to mix all the Midi events together into a single take, overwrite the previous data, keep only the last cycle, stack the clips with only the last clip playing, or stack all the clips individually and play them together. The difference between mix and stacked mix is whether or not they are all in the same clip on the project view above. Lastly, we have Auto Quantize if we want to apply this to our clips right away instead of applying it later. Moving to the right, we have the left and right locator timings currently listed in bars and beats. The flags to the left and right are our locator positions, which set the loop boundaries. The timing can be adjusted by typing the timing into the boxes or by clicking and dragging the flags on the project timeline to correct the position. The lock button to the right sets the punch in and out timings to the same as the locator. With this off, they can be separated. Both of these can be adjusted by clicking the boxes and typing new numbers or by clicking and dragging them on the timeline above. The next section is for the transport. We have go to previous and go to next, which snaps to the start or previous marker and to the end or next marker. Then there are fast forward and rewind buttons. The looped back arrow is the cycle button, which loops the project with respect to the locators during playback and recording. Then we just have stop, play, and record buttons. Midi retrospective recording is used to go back and record a clip that was played while stopped or playing in normal mode. After that is the primary time display, which shows where our cursor is in the project. The buttons to the left change how it's displayed from bars and beats to minutes and seconds. To the right is the project tempo, and this is where we can change the tempo. The last section on the right is the metronome controls. The first button turns on the metronome. The second turns on the count-in. The arrangement will tell us what types of clicks we'll be using. We can open the settings for more controls, especially to change when we want the click to play, such as when recording and during playback. This will allow us to play our track back and make sure it's actually locked to the metronome. This also controls the count-in section, where we can set the length of the count-in and make sure it's using the right time signature, especially if we're counting in around a time signature change. The top panel gives us the click sounds, which I won't change, and the click pattern, which should be selected as needed for your project. The main part of our view is the project zone. This displays all our audio, MIDI, instrument, and effects tracks with their associated clips and events. Starting on the left of the project zone, we can see all our track listings. In the top left, we can add a new track, and a window will open allowing us to select the type of track, inputs, outputs, and the track name. To the right, we can see the number of tracks displayed over the total number of tracks with the track visibility and filter controls that we have at the top. Each track in the list is collapsed in this view and can be expanded by dragging down the bottom line on it. On the tracks, we have an M button to mute the track so it's not heard. The S button solos the track, which makes it so that only the tracks that are soloed will play. Below are the record arm, monitor, settings, mono, and automation controls. To the right of the tracks, we can see all the recorded audio clips and MIDI clips. Above that, we have the project ruler. This is displayed in the project timing format, but can be changed with the arrow on the right side of the ruler. To adjust the view, we need to cover zooming our project and using the scroll bars. The project zone has a scroll bar on the bottom to adjust the horizontal view in time, and the side scroll bar to the right to adjust the view up and down and scroll through the tracks. Each of these has its own zoom buttons in the bottom right corner of the project zone. You can also zoom in and out on the waveform of the track with the zoom bar in the top right. For more advanced zoom controls, we can go to the edit menu at the top and go down to zoom. There we can get a tool such as zoom selection. This also shows the keyboard shortcuts to zoom our projects more quickly. So that covers the basic layout of Cubase 12. In the next video, we'll cover recording audio, editing those clips, punching in and out, and recording multiple takes with comping. Thanks for checking out this video on the layout and navigation of Cubase 12. If this video helped you out, subscribe to the channel and check out our social media links to make sure you see all our new content.